Okay, so now it's going.
Do you have an introduction name for your show?
I was thinking about that, and I wasn't exactly sure. Um,
It seems like you would have a few lined up.
right? Knowing me. Yeah, I don't know. I was just going to be like, what's up? I'm Drew Troshak, and this is local Lansing legend Jaron Osmar.
There's some controversy on Facebook because I changed my name to something that's not
Yes,
real
you
name.
did.
For I had privacy friends that thought it was a good idea to do that. I was like, well, all right, I'll go ahead and do that. But then, so when people Google for me or look for me on Facebook, Jaron Osmer for president comes up. Some gag site that some guy made.
I think I do
I'm
remember
not even
that.
a member of it, so I don't like know what goes on. And there, people out on campus are like, yeah, I figured you had a pretty huge ego. Well, I do have an ego, but I'm not affiliated with that.
Right?
Yeah, but it's causing problems, so.
That's interesting, though, because, you know, one of the reasons why with my Facebook, like, it's not my name, just simply because for businesses and whatever, it allows me to just have free reign of whatever I want to do, and they won't know that that's my Facebook profile.
Someone I know, Nick has that going on, but then he has one that uses his real name on top of it that does all of the like nice things that he does. So it's like another
like
layer,
building a resume.
Another layer of chaff. Yeah. It's like, oh, here's me working charity.
Again.
Yeah. Same photo. Yeah, but if you want to talk about the democracy thing, I'm like a punching bag for that.
Yeah, so recap about what you were talking about there.
So I started a club out on campus, on MSU's campus, based on the idea of promoting direct democracy as an idea, and hopefully running a U.S. congressional candidate somewhere in America, like being one of the backers. There are other people that think this idea is cool and have done stuff with it. Some guys actually ran with the idea, and they did surprisingly well given their resources, but their resources were very paltry. So if you have groups like this group, and maybe some professional bodies, maybe a PAC somewhere, you know, it just takes a few pieces to kind of get the ball rolling and make it into a real thing. So some political wonks, friends of mine were like, you should start a student group based on this idea. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like so much fun. So I enrolled out of state just for that reason. There's not really any reason for me to be there other than that. And it is incredibly fun, and we're doing real things. So the ultimate goal is to run someone for U.S. Congress based on the direct democracy platform. That's not a ball that's entirely in my court, but something we can do, and we are going to be doing, is we're going to be conducting a poll. A typical poll like Rasmussen or Gallup or any of those companies, when they conduct a poll, they get 1,000 samples, and their margin of error is then like 3%, something like that. Well, I can do 1,000 samples. I can do the same methodology with these kids, and we can have a real poll on this topic, and give it to any candidates. Like, oh, we know that women think this is a better idea, or we know that the young think it's a better idea. So you want to market to them, and we're also trying to put together focus groups. That's part of the polling question: is, hey, would you be willing to come in and be part of our focus group? So then we can kind of tweak the messages and be like the preeminent experts on how to market this idea. But we're all just like 20-year-olds, basically. Eating is there. She's like PhD, and Nick's there. He's really smart. But it's like, I don't know. So I'm really excited about it. But a lot of people don't like the idea of direct democracy because they're afraid of mob rule.
And that's a lot of what I was thinking, too. So it's like, from what I've gathered is, sorry to cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
So what I gathered was that with something like that, if you're gathering a bunch of people, that person can influence what they want, similar to, only telling them what that person wants them to hear, such as like Fox News, how Fox News is always trying to tune people into thinking a certain way. And with that can be one thing that'll affect it. However, I also see with a lot of the ways with the full democracy of everyone voting for that too, a lot of people really have no idea what the heck they're really doing. And stuff like American Idol and other things, or like the People's Choice Awards, will show you that people who are just not even worth our time are getting awards for something that just really shouldn't be anything worth value.
Well, that's definitely a real criticism. Um, one of one of the criticisms within the political establishment is that only the fringe people that really, really care vote on things. Like the grassroots are a little bit crazy, they say. My argument is we don't really know. We don't know how educated or uneducated the public is on major issues. We have referendums all the time. When you vote on the issues on a ballot, do you think that that's not legitimate because it's mob rule? Like when we decide whether we're going to have a millage on the bus, in order to support buses here in Lansing, like that's mob rule deciding a millage issue. Why did we put that on the ballot? Why didn't we just have the experts decide whether or not we should have a millage? And I would argue that the experts, that your elected representatives, not only are they not necessarily experts, but they may not really care about your issues, and there's scientific statistical evidence to very strongly suggest that effectively they're bought and paid for.
Mm-hmm.
Not totally, but to a large degree. And if you don't, the mob rule argument suggests that you don't believe in democracy. Why then do you let the mob pick its representatives if you don't trust the mob?
And that is a good, interesting point. Because I mean, you're still going to have to be able to have some sort of influence regardless.
So you're saying the public should have some influence, but you're unsure of how much, maybe?
Well, there is that. It's difficult for me to actually say it, seeing how I'm much less political than you are. But and I don't observe as much as you do on the whole public scene of everything.
Well, I'm a lot less expert than I used to be, but I do know that I'm kind of pissed, and that a lot of people would say that the system is broken, and so something should change. And I like the idea of mixing things up and seeing what works and what doesn't work, basically.
And you knowing me, I do enjoy chaos. Like just changing something up and creating a new thing to try to figure out how we can find a new way to do it. Because just because one thing is working doesn't mean that there might be a better way to do it.
Well, that too, yeah. You've got someone has a neat analogy about trying to adjust the faucets on like a hotel shower, like a junky hotel shower, those like ones that are really complicated to figure out. And like you don't know how much time is delayed between you turning it one way and like the water temperature changing. And what you do is you just kind of like do a lot of random stuff, and you find something that's like acceptable, and then you like take your shower. So if you don't necessarily figure out how it works, and this guy's argument is, if you meddled with it longer, you might have like a more optimum, better shower temperature. If you're not going to figure out, there's peaks and valleys in the temperature, like it's hot and cold, and and then you're like, oh, this is okay, but not okay enough. All right. And I like the idea that you might find systems that work okay, and it might get worse for a while before it gets better. And who's to say if you're like on the best road?
But you can't know until you actually try it.
Right.
Too.
So lots of different things should be attempted all the time. Is kind of how the argument goes. I mean, unless you're like trying to build a rocket ship or something.
Then it gets a little different.
Right. Yeah. But if you're experimenting with, like business models or something, maybe you should have 10 or 100 or 1,000 different ways of doing things and see which ones work.
Mm-hmm. And that's a point that I will agree with. That I'm always the kind of person where even if I'm doing it one way, I'll just try something else just to see if it does work or
I think
not.
you do that for fun, too. Probably.
It is fun. But as far as I can tell, there's always going to be pluses and minuses regardless of how you do things too.
With a political system?
With a political system.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be flaws within it, no matter how hard we try.
And my argument is that a 13% approval rating of Congress is too low.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's a tough sell to most people. There's a 7% confidence rate in them solving problems. 7%. The number of people that would describe themselves as being willing to try communism is like 20-some%. So like you're getting into pretty radical zone when you get to the far ends. Bush's like lowest approval rating of all time was like alarmist as president was 33%. People were they were like, oh my God, it's at 33% approval rating. What has gone wrong? This is like maybe not apocalyptic, but like unprecedented.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so you have Congress at 13. What are you gonna do? Then people say things like, well, we need to stop lobbyists. We need to like reform campaign finance is one of the ideas. And the problem is that in order to do that, you need to convince the politicians to vote on a law to do that. So they're just not going to do it.
Right, because I mean,
forever.
Yeah, they'll just vote for ways and how to keep themselves in their seat longer.
Yeah, you need a majority to break the stalemate. So you can't elect like one or two guys to like change it. You need more than half of them to be like, yeah, I really would like to chop my own leg off. That's a good idea. So how else do you break the system? I don't really know, and I think one way to do it is to put the hands in the power of the power in the hands of the people. Even if it's not perfect, just even the idea of discussing that seems like it might scare the shit out of them. You might have to edit that, I'm sorry.
Who cares? I'm sure he's heard that word before. But even, I mean, I find it interesting with what you're saying about how we, as a people, it will scare them, for sure. Like, people get scared very easily just on simple things.
Yeah, like those fairly silly things.
Like the Facebook on your phone, the Facebook Messenger. But the other thing that I don't like about the people voting for stuff is that they're really gullible. Absolutely gullible. There's so many things out there. Someone will post a picture and I'll just have to be like, this is completely photoshopped, don't believe it. This is just a random picture of a dog and someone's giving the sob story of its abuse. And it's not real. It's just absolutely 100% not real. They even made The Onion. Facebook had to label The Onion as fake news because so many people were believing The Onion, a fake news source, as being real, who showed them that this is fake. There's no way that any part of it's real.
Yeah, okay. So that's a good example of public stupidity. It was like maybe outlandish conspiracy theories and like wild memes that aren't real catching on but do they win over the majority would be my question. And
I feel like it does.
Really?
Because there's so many people that are just constantly freaking out about it. And
maybe it does. No one really knows. I mean, for sure, I would say.
The only thing that I would want is that if these people were to vote stuff, I want them to be fact-checking, not just hearsay or believing. Even if the person who's the mob, whatever you're saying, even if that person is giving whatever their one-sided view.
Oh, so like the mob representative, you mean? If
Yeah.
that person's giving the mob like a biased view. Yeah.
Exactly. That they at least do their research and see what they have that they believe in and what they have that they think is wrong with it, so that they can actually judge for themselves to make their point. Because if you're just taking someone's word, your vote is nothing more than just giving them your vote rather than making it your vote with your own feelings.
One common critique is that propaganda can manipulate the mob really easily.
It can.
Like, so you could have a really biased news network of any name, could be any news
Fox
network,
News. Again.
might be able to manipulate the public's opinion. And my counter to that is, as a member of the public, I would prefer for propaganda to have to manipulate me and my friends and family and peers, rather than a small body of people. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, because the small body of people might still be open to propaganda, but they're also open to other kinds of manipulation. I want you to have to manipulate me and people that I bump into on the street every day. I want it to pass the mustard with them. And my faith in the public is not so low, but maybe it should be. I don't know.
Well, it's difficult because with such little such little trust in our governmental system right now. I mean, what's the difference between trusting in the government and then trusting in the people? For me, I
Right.
feel like there's not that much of a different degree in the trust that's being given.
Well, I think the clincher for me is that they recently the reason one of the reasons I started the group was that Princeton came out with a study where they broke down policy decisions into they put policy decisions up against poll numbers on what people wanted and then what the policymakers voted on, and there appeared to be little to no correlation. It was within the margin of error.
Okay.
So it wasn't clear that policymakers were voting with any regard for public opinion, but if you polled just the very richest members of the public, their opinions did correlate with policy decisions. And then if you take money, it correlates even better with policy decisions. Like if you look to see who donates money. So that to me was, and it's a flawed study for a number of reasons, I guess, but it did come out of Princeton and it was all over the news. And so that kind of was what piqued my interest, because I've always had a instinct that the middle class's interests aren't being watched out for in our era.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then, you know, who knows if that's correct or not, but it feels that way to a lot of people, that like no one cares about my generation. Nobody's really up in arms about that. Instead, we're voting on SOPA, the like copyright ban. I don't know. Last year, this big internet to do was this big SOPA law where they were gonna shut down websites that violated copyright.
Okay.
And that was like the big piece of legislation that year that was in the public eye. Why are we discussing, like, why is that the thing that Congress bats around? Why are we not really tackling student debt? Or why are we not really tackling like the housing crisis? Like, the banks got bailed out. Did the people get bailed out? Is that a coincidence? And so there's lots of things that like hint at the idea that maybe our interests aren't being watched out for, and I think it's because we don't have a seat at the table. I get to choose red or blue,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't matter which one wins even. Like, if everything was blue, how much different would our world be? I don't know, really. Everything was red for a while, and it's basically the same as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So with the public voting, would that get rid of the Republican and the Democrat?
well, no, because our idea is not to get rid of the Republicans and the Democrats, because the party is so strong. No one's ever going to vote for a third party, like in big
Right.
numbers. So what you do, the idea is to run a congressperson in a district during a special election. So what that means is someone's retired or died or molested their page and is quitting. So there's an empty seat somewhere in the country. We don't know where this will be.
Mm-hmm.
But they happen like every few months. It's surprisingly frequent. And what you want to do is get somebody to run as a direct democracy candidate in that area, because nothing else is going on politically at that time. It'll be like February or some weird time. And so Politico and all these different people that just cover politics are going to have their giant telescopes and microscopes pointed at that situation. So because the real objective is to make a big splash. Now, your question was, are we going to run, do you want to run as a third party? Is this abolish the idea of Democrats and Republicans? And the answer is no, because most districts are gerrymandered now, so you know already almost certainly a Republican's going to win, or almost certainly a Democrat's going to win. Like, they're predominantly one party or the other, at least so far that consistently one side gets a majority. And so what you do is you run a candidate. If it's a Republican district that goes Republican every 2 years, then you run somebody during the primary and you say, I'm a direct democracy Republican because
Okay.
I'm running in a Republican district, and the people who vote on my policy are going to be Republicans. So I'm going to have Republican policies. The only difference between this kind of Republican and a normal Republican is they are actually listening to their actual voters' opinions.
Okay.
But their actual voters are Republicans or Democrats if it's a Democratic district.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sort of sneaking in and co-opting the establishment. You're saying, "Oh, I'm totally one of you guys. Don't worry." And in fact, I'm just even better at being one of you guys. So that's the answer to that. And the grassroots, I think, will buy that. Like the Tea Party, that's one of the Tea Party's big problems is they say, our district's red every time. Why does our guy not vote the way we want him to vote?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're asking for all of these different things, and our guy doesn't always provide it. He just goes along with whatever the heads of the party tell him to do, but he's supposed to listen to us.
Right.
And so that's why they vote like wild radicals into power. Or they try to, but they're a similar, they have like a third party thing going on where they're outgunned and don't have the money. I mean, those like sort of fringe sort of people
Mm-hmm.
don't have the money, but they do have the people. So the people are asking for that sort of thing, but they're not getting that sort of thing. I'm not a Tea Party guy. I do enjoy going to all sorts of events all over the political spectrum. I would love to go to Occupy events if they were around. I can't find them.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you ever go to that Stephen Colbert party?
No, that was a really cool idea though. Super cool. Their rally was just for like common sense and like reasonableness or
And
something.
fear too, I think.
Oh, his was for fear.
Yeah. I think Colbert was fear, and then what's his face? Jon Stewart was for like rationality.
Yeah. That seemed really cool. He's on the list of like trusted Americans in my book.
Mm-hmm.
People have asked him to like run for president, and his retort. Do you remember his retort?
I don't remember, but I do remember him jokingly putting himself out for the presidential election.
He doesn't do that anymore because people will be serious.
Right, and he doesn't want to steal away from their votes and all that other different stuff for the people who are actually running. But I still think that he would be a good candidate if he keeps his writers.
Oh yeah, I think he would be a good candidate. Yeah.
Just the whole cabinet of writers. That's all he needs.
well, his policy is, his retort is, you don't want me to run for public office, and I shouldn't run for public office, because I'm a comedian.
Right.
Is the state so bad that you need a comedian? My job is to poke holes in the status quo.
Well, think about this though. If you're still wanting that mob leader to run for something, to vote for the people, I think that he would actually be a good candidate for whatever. So he'll listen.
Or someone like him.
Or someone, very similar.
Yeah, you take somebody who's not you take somebody who's more of a guy out of the Yellow Pages and not a established political wonk hoity-toity. You want someone from the outside. Iceland recently elected a comedian as the mayor of their capital city.
Did they?
Yeah, or maybe even their prime minister. And they did it because they were disgusted with how things were going. So it was like a joke. It was like, let's have this comedian run things, and he doesn't like it because he has real responsibility. But it's an interesting idea because you're selecting a member of the public who did not have dreams and ego for public office.
Mm-hmm.
They're called upon to be a good citizen.
Now, have you heard about the cat that I think is a mayor of a town in Alaska?
No.
And
That's interesting.
So I don't know how exactly they're doing it there. I mean, maybe they just put a paw print on whatever laws are being passed inside that town, but there's that where it's just completely weird. But there's other comedians that have joked about the country and the economy and all that stuff, but it got to a point where they actually put themselves in it. Like, I think Al Franken
Yeah.
is a good example of someone who is actually trying to make a change rather than just joking about it.
Yeah, that was an interesting turn. I'd like to see things like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that's interesting about like celebrity candidates or like sports star candidates
Mm-hmm.
is they are like, maybe they're not always totally like a regular person, they're not like one of us, but they're also not, they haven't been in the mix their whole life either.
Mm-hmm.
So that's neat. I like that.
Ronald Reagan did it.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things I used to hold against him. Was like, an actor, really? Ugh. But he also was active for a long time before he became.
Right,
they didn't
right.
Pull him out
It's
of
not
a hat.
like it's not like graduating high school and going straight to the
Yeah.
big leagues.
Yeah. Which it would be more interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm. But I'm pretty sure that we hit our time mark.
Really? Okay.
I'm pretty sure. If it hasn't been 12 minutes, then I have no idea.
Flunk him.
I haven't been. I mean, 8 minutes I believe is the minimum.
Oh, really? Then you're
But
fine.
I gotta say we've been going longer than 12 minutes.
I think so.
But even so, I still have one more question to ask. Of like, what would you think about just taking away the whole Republican Democrat system and just having it a little bit more simpler with multiple candidates who actually feel like they know what they're doing, and they're not just there for their own agendas of filling their pockets and doing whatever. But it's like because I still think that there would be a good way is just to flush the whole Democrat Republican system and then just even the people and just start back from scratch with a lot of different things. I know
I
that
like the idea of starting from scratch, sort of, but that makes me sound like apocalyptic or something. But I've been hanging out with a guy from Panama who's really interesting. He's like a Panamanian aristocrat or something, and works in the political world, and actually ran with a candidate with this idea.
Mhm.
But there, what they do is you vote. You vote for your like top 5 choices, and you get like every district gets like 6 people or something. So that's how you get like Green Party people in, and like Tea Party, and like Occupy people, and like weird, who knows what kind of like random bizarre people appear and wind up being dropped into the mix.
Mhm.
Rather than the first past the post thing only gives you red or blue. It only leaves the possibility for 2 choices, basically, in the end.
And what I see with the red and blue too is that, they'll always. I feel like what I've observed is that they'll try to screw over the other person from actually trying to get some work done.
Yeah, you get more votes if you go really negative. Like they know that if they are like crappy people, then they look better comparatively. It's like, oh, you have to pick one of us, but this guy, oh man, look at his beard or something. It's like that's way easier than me like having anything substantive than us like trying to figure out the proper solution to a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is for me to like come up with wittier insults than you do. And if just one of us is coming up with insults, like that person wins. So it's like it's a sort of broken. But if you had to insult everybody, yeah. If there weren't parties, if it was just like a big dogfighting cloud of a mess, then you might get more actual what do you call that? Like working together, compromise. Just because the mechanisms we currently have wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But those situations are like a chaotic mess, but maybe that's still superior, because out of a chaotic mess you only get the things you really need done, as opposed to a bunch of crap that's wrong. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the idea of multiple ideas. A lot of countries have multiple parties. They have a voting system that allows for multiple parties to get in. But that's not going to happen anytime soon here. Our Constitution's the oldest living Constitution written.
And that's why I think that we need a reset.
Just
just like a computer, we just need a good hard reset.
Yeah, I'm sure you could sell that.
And then,
yeah. Hey, I got an idea, everyone.
Just reboot it. Ground up. We got it. Let's get that the Apple people on it. They'll talk about it.
Yeah,
The
just write
new
up-
product.
Write up a few paragraphs.
iGovernment. It's the greatest thing. We're gonna put it on watches.
There's a real cool documentary called Seasteading, where the guy advocates the idea of, he's like, if you don't like your government, it's too bad. There's not like a product where you can be like, oh, Apple sucks, I'm gonna go get a Samsung,
Right?
you know, or whatever. You can't just like opt out. Instead, it's like, oh, I live here, I have to move 3,000 miles to another place where people aren't allowed to opt out. You know, so his idea was like, wow, why don't we all just build these boats and float around and like
Waterworld
network
style.
with, yeah, Waterworld style, and like network with each other. And he had like all these different like social experiments and like actual physical real world experiments that are like illegal or not okay for some reason. I haven't actually seen it, but his idea is like, if we just break out of that, like there are so many possibilities that we have even forgot to dream about when no one is allowed to even look at what you're doing and enforce it. So who knows? It seems hard floating out in Waterworld land. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't need to like attend, you know, monkey knife fights and or whatever
While
else.
drinking your own pee.
Right, yeah. But it seemed like an interesting premise, at least. It's a good way to experiment with it, because you're not going to muck up my life. You're out on a boat.
Right. But, you know, as long as we keep our minds open and experiment with new things, and I think that it would still be neat just to see if we can try to run what you're going for. And if it works or not, we'll know. Or
Right.
even if even that one time might not be enough to really collect the data in order to continue to.
But you could decide whether or not it was worth going forward. I mean, one congressman is not going to change the system.
No,
you could
it's
watch
not.
to see if they were voting in a wacky, wonky way all over the place. I mean, yeah, if it turns into like American Idol, maybe you're like, this is not a good idea. But at least it's
Text
only
in your vote.
But it's only one vote, one way or the other, out of 355, I think is the number. It's not going to break the system, but it could fix the system.
And that's something that we do need, though. We just need to try something new.
Unless 13% is acceptable.
Well, I don't want a 13% grade on this paper. So, so if we can raise the approval rating, whatever we can try to do is good. I just think that it's different, and I'm not behind people. What I want is just someone else that I can trust. But how can we trust those people if they're always letting our trust be broken? So regardless, I think it's still going to be a long time until we figure out what we're going to be doing with our country and how we can do stuff. But until that day, let's just keep trying new things and keep seeing what we can do to make this country a lot better and get out of the rut that we're in.
I agree.
But hey, thank you for coming out though, Jaron. I appreciate it.
I like your chairs.
Thank you. They are very nice. Alright, now I'm going to stop this video. Don't forget to give me an A.